Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. And yes, not a movie review, not anything too particularly fun to be discussing right now. No, stepping into a little bit of uncharted territory, a little bit of unknown waters here with this Marissa Barrera situation that just dropped this afternoon for Scream 7. Yes, this is kind of some shocking news. I'm not going to lie to you, and we will say up front that nothing has been fully confirmed for reasonings on why this is. The only thing we know is that it's been reported that she is no longer a part of the Scream Seven property or whatever's going on with that, and that she is essentially, you know, been fired, I guess is what they're the word that's been sent around. But again, we don't know. We don't have anything fully confirmed. All the sources are indicating that Paramount hasn't said exactly why. This is just any source. But the fact that you have outlets like Deadline and outlets like Bloody Disgusting all picking this up, it adds a little bit of legitimacy to the claim. But again, we just don't know why. There's a lot of speculation. And yeah, there's a lot of horrible things going on in the world right now. And that's not what we're here to discuss. It's not what we're here to talk about. We talk about spooky movies on this show, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Is if this is confirmed and this is all to be believed and true, where does this leave Scream 7?
Yeah, and I think it leaves it in an interesting spot, for better or worse. I mean, looking into this, wasn't there already a discussion with Radio Silence going off and in doing their Untitled Universal Monsters property that she and isn't she attached to that?
She is attached to a Universal property with Radio Silence. Yes,
Wasn't there already a conversation? Because I believe didn't we cover it on Sunday Scaries that she may not be returning for Scream Seven?
I think the gist of it was is that it. I don't necessarily know if it was that she wasn't planning on returning. I think it may have been the situation where everybody was speculating that they're gonna do kind of like an in between film between what would be technically the climax of this, so that way whatever 4 is would bring her and Jenna Ortega back, just because I think at the time it wasn't like any bad blood between her and the studio. I think it was because of Jenna Ortega's schedule and
Okay.
the fact that her and Marissa are, sisters and they're the main, kind of component for this new trilogy. That was the big like problem at the time. So that's when you started getting all these rumors about like, oh, let's do one where it's like it's just Nev Campbell and she's off at like a safe house, and you get all those cool posters like Creepy Duck made one and all that where it's just like a cabin and you see a ghost face killer out there and everything. It's like it's a cool idea and it's definitely something new I'd like to see. It's a nice way to bring back Nev Campbell if she even wants to come back and work with Paramount on this. But yeah, I don't think anything once again was confirmed.
Yeah, because didn't Radio Silence come out as everyone was talking about this being a trilogy and said, hold on a second, this was never necessarily supposed to be a
Hmm.
trilogy. So, like for me, I think all the cards were on the table in the sense of we didn't know necessarily what Scream 7 was going to look like because
Hmm.
Radio Silence was never confirmed to come back. You look at the ending of Scream 6, yes, I'm sure, as always, you can always get more out of the franchise. But, if you look at Scream 6 to be that swan song, I think it's a proper ending. So, not necessarily something where we need everyone returning for Scream 7. And, my displeasure for 5 and 6. Uh, Opens up for a regime change, I think, as we're already getting a different director, maybe a new set of stories here. This doesn't necessarily write anything off of, we didn't kill anyone on screen, just like Sydney. And, she could always come back into the playing field if that does allow, if everything lines up. And I think, I think it leaves a big question for Scream 7. But, for me, again, my displeasure for the last two films, I think it opens up a little bit more potential because we don't have tons of connective tissue here in terms of what we've been seeing, maybe a fresh start. I don't know. It leaves a lot of questions that we're going to have to wait and see on.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that, yeah, they really have had a tendency in this new series to not want to kill people. And we've criticized that heavily in the last two, especially with the last one. I mean, there were so many fake outs that it just got to be kind of ridiculous at one point. Um, and I think that overall this kind of sucks for Melissa Rivera or Barrera, because like this is just one of those things where she's a very good actress. We had a lot of positive things. I went back and listened to our review for Scream 6, and we had a lot of positive things to say about her performance and how far she had kind of come since the first one. Not saying that she was bad in that, but definitely you could see they were doing a lot with her character. They definitely had some things in mind, and they were, whether they were going to pursue them or not, they kind of left them open. But yeah, I mean, I think that for fans who've grown to really love the character of Sam Carpenter, and now to have this kind of monkey wrench be thrown into it again, I think it's just going to whip up another round of speculation and what ifs and all that we just had with Nev Campbell over the last year. And again, we don't know when we're getting Scream 7, but I just don't necessarily know if this bodes well for at least Paramount helming this franchise. Because, like Halloween and others, this might sour some people, how some people are now soured on Blumhouse after those films and how they handled it and how they kind of let them do it. And I wonder if by the time we get Scream 7, if they don't reinstate Melissa Barrera at some point, that's are we going to see like kind of a backlash to that? Or there going to be people who are going to say like boycott Scream 7? Like I've already seen it today, where it's like boycott Scream franchise until they reinstate her and everything. Like are these going to be effects that are going to be residual, or are we going to see these a year from now when the film's about to come out?
As I look at it, I think that wound is still fresh. Obviously, we're covering this
Oh
as the
yeah.
news broke. In looking at it, we get Scream 7 in 2 years, let's say randomly.
Hmm.
Just a random date out there. I think people are honestly not going to remember a lot of the things that are happening around this. I think it will be a talking point, maybe mildly, but I don't think, hey, I disliked Scream 5 and 6 or 5 and I still went and saw 6. You know what I mean? So, I think as a franchise as a whole, do I think this is going to drag it through the dirt? I don't know necessarily if that's going to be the case, especially when you look at a cast director that's not accountable for any decision that a production company is going to make. So creatives being creatives and being paid for it, I think it would be inappropriate, not a good look for to kind of discredit an entire film because of a decision that's made. For me, so I don't know necessarily if that's a big sample size of people that are gonna not go out and see Scream 7, and I don't know necessarily if it's gonna be something where we get into Scream 7, let's say, and they tease Stu. I think most people are gonna end up in the theater to go check that one out. So yeah, I think that wound is very fresh right now, and yeah, I think emotions are high. I think people are gonna say a lot of things. But I don't know necessarily if it's really going to carry over to the actual release date of Scream 7.
Yeah, I mean, time does have a tendency to maybe not necessarily heal all wounds, but it definitely creates a scab. And speaking of people who weren't involved, or at least had no hand in this, from what they're saying, Christopher Landon about 30 minutes ago, as of recording, put out a slight statement. I guess he put out a tweet that says, "This is my statement. Everything sucks. Stop yelling. This was not my decision." So yeah, clearly, I mean, it's one sentence, so I'm not going to sit here and infer that how he feels about the whole thing entirely, other than just saying it's not my decision and it does suck. So it's like whether it was something in the vein of like maybe Paramount stepped in and said, hey, something to her, and then they were like, hey, you need to kind of you know tighten things up on your social media, whatever it turned out being. Because again, one of the talking points I wanted to bring up here was it's like we just keep seeing this happen with big studios, and it seems like it's all across the board. Because I went back and looked at the James Gunn situation, the Gina Carano situation, and all various different political topics involving old tweets, stuff they've said, things like that. And it's just it seems like every like 2 years we wind up with some kind of studio intermingling where they go and they say, okay, you've posted something, you've said something, and now we've got to take you off this project, or we got to throw you off this project. And I just think that it's like, you know, this is something that is just completely unprecedented if you look back prior to social media. Like you had to literally go into the tabloids, or you had to be photographed or say something dumb, stick your foot in your mouth in an award show or on the news or in an interview. Now it's like, the internet is just the world stage. And it's like, is this still something that you see as being more or less, I guess, something that we're still adjusting to as a society? Or were you kind of sitting here thinking like, this is just how it is now? It's like, if whether you have what could be perceived on one side as positive, what could be received as negative, if you have an opinion about something and you're in the public eye, you really got to keep it hush hush if you want to work in Hollywood.
Yeah, I think we're in such a transitionary period right now with social media because, for the most part, you look at a lot of those tweets, and some of them are older, and they're kind of being dug up, and it's one of those things where I don't think anyone would have thought that tweet would come back and bite you on the butt a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
it does, and you look at uh, your favorite actors from the 80s and social media wasn't a thing, there would probably be a distaste for a handful of some of your favorite actors if they had social media at that point in time, and I think that's kind of what we're dealing with here is navigating the social media. I think, nowadays, again, we're in that transitionary period. I think a lot of actors and just people who have a presence in social media are going to really kind of monitor that situation now that we're kind of seeing this backlash sometimes with studios taking actors out of properties. So, I think it could be one of those things where social media is going to become more so not really your actual opinions, more so where walking that line to not make anyone angry and to really not have any issues or any fallout from anything. So I think we're in that transitionary period right now. But it's always going to be two sides, to the coin there, where sometimes people are look at something as a positive, and other people are going to look at it as a negative. And I think this is kind of one of those, hairy situations. But it's one of those things where we don't really know a lot of the motivation here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be interesting, certainly, to see what more fallout is going to be here. But looking at Scream 7, I'm curious as to what it's going to look like. Again, we're in those infancy stages right now, just coming out of the strike and everything, so we really don't know what the premise is, and if there was any intention to bring people back, or to start a new story. So I think having a fresh set of eyes on this, not really having radio silence, behind the lens this time around, and seeing what they come up with, I'm definitely intrigued.
Yeah, and I'm also excited to see what Christopher Landon will do. I really hope that this hasn't created any bad blood amongst him and the studio, and they can kind of keep moving things through. But that leads me to kind of my final question about this. You bring up the strike, you bring up, just like how we Hollywood's kind of been in this thing for a while now, where it's like it's a lot of animosity between actors, studios, writers, and studios. It's like it seems like, maybe now that people have gotten their demands and things, maybe this is a reactionary thing of, hey, if we're going to pay you guys this much, or we're going to work on this, maybe studios are just kind of being a bit more cutthroat. Maybe this is just the first domino of what we're going to be seeing now. It's like, if you don't play ball, if you do something that we even see as mildly controversial or could potentially become controversial, that we can't take that risk. It's like, and I don't know, I feel like, again, it could be a totally different situation, but I just think like it just seems really convenient coming right after, like, what is it, a week, 2 weeks since they struck a deal with the Actors Guild, that it's like this happens. And it could be, again, there could have been bad blood. Maybe she was just considered for Scream 7. Maybe they're just deciding to move into another direction. We don't know. But I'm just curious to see if that's going to be something that we see more of due to what the results of the strike were.
Yeah, and I think you're always going to look at that. one of the issues is going to be, you want your actors to have a voice and to have that presence in social media to promote movies and things like that. But it's their social media. They're gonna voice their opinions and things like that. So
And their businesses. So
yeah. It's one of those things where it I don't. We're in such a transitionary period. I'll go back to it where
yeah,
it's just like I think they're going to try to figure out how to monitor things, but then at that point, if you're monitoring someone's social media so heavily that is if it's not their voice, then I might as well the studio might as well just pay someone to
do it
run
for them.
social
Yeah,
media, yeah, and not say anything offensive. And at that point, what is the point other than to promote a movie? So I don't know. It's one of those. We're in a very interesting situation if that ends up being the case here. And I think people are going to look back on this if everything gets confirmed and it becomes a bigger talking point than it already is. But it's a very very odd situation. This is really the only thing I could say about it.
yeah, and I won't dive into this too deep because I want to see what happens more. But the last point that I even had on my mind here was just a conversation I had earlier with someone where I was just thinking, you know, what if this is, under wraps now, but what if we find out later this week after the holiday here in the States and all that, that, this comes down to another money situation? Like, holy shit. What if we got another Nev Campbell situation where Marissa Barrera is like, hey, I've done two of these. I want to bump and pay. And, now again, writers strike, all that, actors strike. Maybe there was a little bit more of like an implication of like, hey, we should see more than this, and then that could be a factor as well. We just don't know. But like, yeah, I really think that if Paramount really wants to, put their foot in their mouth and do that again, that's going to look really bad on the studio. That is going to make everybody really, I think, 100% side with the Melissa Barrera situation here, because it's like it sucks. It does, but at the same time, we just watch them drag this strike out for what was it, 9 months for both, if you factor in both teams, almost a year, of where they were basically saying, no, we can't pay you, no, we can't pay you, and then finally they did. So it's kind of just like, when you go to a car dealership and you're trading your car in and they're like, no, we can give you this much. But then you keep wheeling and dealing and suddenly you got, an extra $7,000 just because you knew that they were bullshitting you. Like, I don't know. It is an interesting time. And I feel like this could just be one domino to fall. And, over the next year or so, we could see other projects being hampered. We could see other things like this happening. I'm wondering if studios are just going to, be a little bit more vigilant. Maybe they're tightening up the leash a little bit more. I don't know, but it sucks. I mean, really, we don't have any more than that. And I'm just speculating at this point. I could play the what if game all day. But if you have anything to add to that, Luke, feel free. If not, I don't want to make you just repeat yourself. So
Oh no. I just think Hollywood's always been such a cutthroat business
it
where
has.
I mean, you look at actors being paid, directors, anything. Yeah, just looking at it on paper, you could say, oh, they're making a lot of money. But when you look at the spectrum of how much a film actually makes in the box office, and how much merchandising, things like that, they're only getting a small piece of that, bag in a sense, where the studios are making a lot. So it's like the people, the executives, things like that are really making you know multiples upon multiples of what usually directors and actors are making. So it always kind of goes back to us being in the creative space and wanting to write and direct and things like that. You always pay attention, especially for me. I always pay attention to how severely underpaid writers tend to be, and
Mm-hmm.
how they don't get a lot of credit, as much credit as they should, for having that creative property. So I think that's always going to be a talking point. It's something that always has to be remedied, since the creation of Hollywood, to be honest. And I hope those talking points are brought up a little further, because it is something that I think things do need to be evened out, especially when you're paying someone for their creative mind, for their performance, for their creative techniques. Those people do need to be compensated appropriately.
I agree. And I think most everybody would agree with that sentiment. I think that everybody who works hard and, really, literally and figuratively puts their blood, sweat, and tears into these things. These little horror pictures that we love so much. And film in general. I think that people deserve compensation, and I mean that with everything. But to err on the side of caution here again, we're not going to get into any of the political stuff. There's all kinds of things when it comes to unions. This stuff that's going on with surrounding these posts and things like that. But we are again just here to talk about horror movies, and unfortunately, a series that we rather enjoy. Maybe not so much these new films, but is just seeming like it's hitting another roadblock, and we don't like to see that. But we're going to keep up on this story. Obviously, I think everybody is this week. I really think things will probably quiet down here, at least on our side of things in the States, going within the next couple of days. Because for those of you outside of the US, we have Thanksgiving coming up, which means for us on the channel, we have some Thanksgiving content to look forward to. There's a really nice transition. I look forward to that. Definitely, if you feel this is wrong, you want to show your support, definitely do so. I do still like Melissa Barrera a lot. I'm excited to see what she does with Radio Silence for this, Universal Monsters property that she's attached to. And I think that she's got a promising career, whether she's in Scream 7 or not, or whether we get Scream 7 or not. I really hope so, because I do want Christopher Landon and his team to be able to show up for this. I was very excited about that announcement. So, but alrighty, guys, it's gonna wrap us up here. So until next time, I am Dylan Newell,
and I'm Luke Janesco.
and remember, stay scared.